The wind whipped across the scorched tarmac as Lieutenant Mara Quinn gripped the warped cockpit canopy, her heart hammering like a war drum. Mara's gloves, caked in grease, trembled only slightly as she released the latch. Around her, veteran pilots in crisp uniforms exchanged quips and smirks, none daring to believe she could coax life from the battered airframe before her. The compound lay silent under a bruised sky, its hangars scarred by months of relentless training sorties. The old fighter jet, affectionately dubbed Iron Sparrow, stood half forgotten at the edge of the line, its once sleek fuselage pitted with age and battle scars. Most saw only a relic. Mara saw a legacy, backstory thread. Mara paused to inhale the scent of hydraulic fluid and old metal. She remembered her father's countless lessons, how he'd taught her that real precision wasn't just about aiming a rifle, but about listening. To engines, to steel, to one's own hesitation. Years ago, she'd watched him, sniper scope, leveled, every breath synchronized with the target. And her mother, an elite medic, had shown her that calm hands in crisis could save more lives than 100 guns. Now, in this predominantly male enclave, her competence would be tested by steel and spit. She moved to the panel beside the cockpit and began cleaning the weathered lenses of the HUD display, her slender fingers deftly coaxing stubborn grime away. Around her, pilots joked about the jet's slow startup and unpredictable hydraulics. She said nothing. An abrupt alarm shattered the morning calm. The disaster response hub's monitors flickered to life. A neighboring training squadron's jets were caught in a sudden hailstorm at high altitude. Radios crackled with panicked calls. Communication lost, instruments iced, pilots disoriented. Inciting incident. In an instant, orders crackled through the PA. Rescue mission. All available craft deploy. Every serviceable jet roared to life, but Iron Sparrow was deemed unfit. The commander's sharp voice cut through the din. Lieutenant Quinn, take a back seat. This one's beyond repair. Laughter rippled through the ranks. Audience prompt. Drop it if you've ever been told you couldn't handle what others call too old or too beaten. Her jaw clenched. Savagely she retorted, "Sir, with permission, I'd like to demonstrate otherwise." The air stilled. Audience prompt. Comment if you believe experience can outmatch raw power. Crisis and reveal. With hesitant nods, the commander relented. Mara climbed into Iron Sparrow's cockpit. No one expected the engine to turn over, but with a practiced twist, the ancient Pratt & Whitney growled awake, spitting oil and defiance. The roar echoed off the hangar walls as she taxied onto the runway. In the eye of the storm, hail battered the canopy like stones. Instruments flickered, but Mara's calm voice guided her through each frozen gauge. She descended into the swirling tempest, tracking her squadron's mayday beacons. Each maneuver echoed the sniper's precision, each bank reflecting the medic's steady hand. Behind her, the battered fuselage shuddered, systems groaning. A sudden hydraulic failure pitched the jet toward a deadly spin. Instinctively, Mara adjusted trim and rerouted hydraulics manually, her father's voice in her mind. Master the machine. Don't let it master you. Moments later, battered pilots climbed aboard Iron Sparrow's wings. One by one, she escorted them through the storm to safety, each lifeline a testament to her hidden mastery, resolution, and reflection. As the last pilot touched down at base, Iron Sparrow's engine coughed and died. Silence settled again on the compound. Mara eased from the cockpit, bruised but unbowed. The mocking smiles had vanished, replaced by awe. She ran a hand over the jet's scarred metal and whispered, "You and I, old friend, we're just getting started." End of part 1. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The heat from the rescue's aftermath still radiated through the tarmac as Mara leaned against Iron Sparrow's battered wing, her pulse slowing but her mind far from calm. The hangar lights buzzed overhead, reflecting in the oil pool beneath. The old jet's belly. Around her, the returning pilots were shepherded away for debrief and medical checks, some glancing back at her, eyes wide with the lingering fear they'd nearly carried to their graves. She caught snippets of whispered admiration that only hours before had been jeers. She didn't relish it. She just wanted the truth to stick, that underestimating old metal and quiet resolve was a mistake. That could cost more than pride. Backstory. Thread. While the maintenance crew hustled toward Iron Sparrow with a trolley of battered tools, Mara found herself sliding back to her earliest memories in her mother's field hospital. The smell of iodine and burnt sand. The calm in her mother's eyes even as blood pooled around the stretchers. One patient at a time, Mara. You hold them steady, or you lose them. She'd learned the same applied to any machine, especially those that rattled, leaked, and threatened to die mid-mission. A sudden voice cut through her thoughts. Lieutenant Quinn. She turned. Commander Alvarez strode forward, cap tucked under his arm, eyes narrowed but no longer mocking. Debrief in 5. Bring your checklist. And bring the bird's logs too. I want to see how you kept that relic flying. She almost smiled. Yes, sir. Inside the briefing room, the air was stale, the projector flickering on old cinder block walls. Mara stood at the head of the table, Iron Sparrow's maintenance binder open beside her. The other pilots flanked Alvarez men who'd once brushed her off as the hangar queen, the girl good enough to patch a bullet wound, but never trusted to pull the trigger herself. Inciting incident. The logs told the story plain. This jet shouldn't have flown. Yet here it sat, parked outside, a living contradiction. Alvarez ran a calloused thumb along the pages. If you hadn't gone up there. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. She felt the tide shift, a subtle current pulling her from the shadows of obscurity. But the cost was already brewing. A technician burst through the briefing room door, radio in hand. Sir, new transmission from Outpost 9. They've been hit by an unexpected microburst power down. No comms except for this one static line. They're requesting aerial recon ASAP. Only short-range fighters are operational, except Iron Sparrow. Alvarez's eyes flicked to her. Lieutenant Quinn, you're the only one who knows her temperament now. A ripple of disbelief ran through the room. Not even 12 hours since she'd limped the jet home, and they wanted her back in that unstable cockpit? Audience prompt. Drop of if you'd push through the storm twice to prove what you're made of. Mara's lips twitched. Request permission to prep Iron Sparrow for immediate recon, sir. Alvarez stared a heartbeat too long, then gave a single nod. Permission granted. But if she fails, don't expect a search party. Audience prompt. Comment if you'd bet on the impossible when nobody else will. Back in the hangar. She suited up alone this time. Her flight gloves were stiff with dried oil. The mechanics watched from a distance, whispering about superstitions and ghosts that haunted old airframes. She ignored them. Inside the cockpit, the familiar hum of the battered instrument panel welcomed her like an old friend's growl. She traced her mother's patch sewn onto her flight suit's inner lining threadbare, the edges frayed from too many washes. Calm hands in the worst moments, Mara. That's your legacy. Takeoff. Iron Sparrow struggled at first. Hydraulics coughed, and a warning light flickered angry red. Mara coaxed the throttle, whispered curses to the rusted throttle linkages. Slowly, painfully, the jet eased forward, then faster, until the runway blurred beneath her. She climbed toward the bruised sky, sun breaking through shredded storm clouds. Her headset crackled with static, then the panicked voice of Outpost 9's dispatcher filtered in. We've got a supply convoy stuck halfway down the ravine. Trail rain turned it into a mudslide. We can't reach them. If they lose that fuel, we're done. She banked Iron Sparrow south, the jet's old fuselage rattling in protest. Terrain flickered beneath her like a grainy war film. She adjusted the radar's manual calibration 1. of the systems the mechanics had called dead on arrival. It sputtered but came to life, the screen blooming with a ghostly outline of the ravine. Her fingers flew across the console, patching coordinates back to base. Another tremor shuddered through Iron Sparrow. An oil line near the left intake burst, spraying vapor that hissed across the canopy. She flipped the emergency cutoff valves, rerouted fuel flow, her father's sniper comm centering her every movement. Through the patchy clouds, she glimpsed the convoy, half-sunken trucks, men clinging to tarps, waving frantically at her battered jet. She dipped her wings in reply. Rescue in motion. Base scrambled a second team. But without Mara's constant updates, they'd be flying blind into a mountain pass that could eat a modern jet alive. She throttled lower, engines straining against sudden crosswinds. Below, a rockslide erupted, massive boulders skidding toward the convoy. She banked Iron Sparrow hard, aligning her nose just above the slide. One push of the afterburner, a crazy, reckless move, and the jet's sonic boom rattled the rocks, dislodging them in a new direction, away from the convoy. The old girl roared, defiance as debris pelted her wings. New dents hammered into the patched fuselage. Inside, Mara's heart thundered, but her hands stayed calm. Resolution and reflection. An hour later, with the convoy safe, Mara limped Iron Sparrow back toward base. The engine sputtered, landing gear half-jammed, but they made it. 2 survivors. In a war against the elements. On the tarmac, she sat in the cockpit for a long moment, forehead resting against the control yoke. When she finally climbed down, Alvarez stood waiting. No words, just a stiff nod that spoke volumes. Around him, the hangar crew regarded her with something new in their eyes. Belief. She patted Iron Sparrow's battered side, oil streaking her flight glove. You're not done yet, old friend. End of part 2. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Cold open hook. The battered Iron Sparrow shuddered beneath Mara as thunderheads loomed on the horizon, a promise that the skies were nowhere near done testing her resolve. The hangar buzzed behind her with the kind of tense energy that meant everyone was watching, but no one wanted to admit it. She could feel it in the way the ground crew stole glances her way, how the pilot's laughter had dulled into wary respect. They'd seen what she and the old fighter could survive, and that made some uneasy. She pulled off her helmet, sweat-damp hair clinging to her neck. Her slender frame felt like it had absorbed every vibration of the last 12 hours. But there was no time for exhaustion now. Backstory thread. In the echoing quiet of the maintenance bay, Mara thought of the last time she'd seen her father's sniper rifle disassembled on a battered table, each piece lined up with surgical precision. Trust the old gear more than the new, if you know how to read its mood, he'd said. Those words hummed through her now as she stared at Iron Sparrow's open panels, hydraulic lines snaking like veins. The maintenance chief, a grizzled tech named Decker, shook his head at the corrosion eating away at the intake housing. Lieutenant Quinn, we can patch her, but she won't hold for another stunt like that. Mara's eyes flicked to the storms brewing outside. She won't have to. Next time we make the fight come to us, Decker snorted. You sound like your old man, she grinned. Good, then we have a chance. Inciting incident. An emergency alert ripped through the compound speakers. Alvarez's voice, clipped and grim. Attention all personnel. Long-range radar shows an unidentified rogue drone swarm headed for our airspace. All functional aircraft scramble immediately. A rookie pilot, Thompson, burst into the bay, eyes wide. They've taken out 2 of our perimeter drones already. Whatever they're packing, it's not off-the-shelf tech. Mara felt the fear ripple through the hangar. Drones had been a hypothetical threat, the kind everyone trained for but never really expected. Now they were real, and half the base's fleet was still grounded. She traced her fingers along Iron Sparrow's wing, The jet hummed under her touch, as if waking to the storm. Audience prompt. Drop a if you've ever felt underestimated. By people who didn't know what you're capable of. She turned to Decker. We don't need speed this time. We need endurance. Give me auxiliary battery backups. Reroute the targeting sensors to manual. I'll fly blind if I have to. Decker barked a laugh. You're crazy. Good, crazy's what we've got. She ducked beneath the fuselage, double-checking fuel lines. Every bolt she tightened reminded her of her mother's hands, binding wounds in desert heat. Work calm, work fast. You've only got one chance to get it right. Takeoff. The storm cracked open above her as she climbed into cockpit. The runway lights flickered under wind and rain. One by one, other jets clawed into the sky sleek. Machines that wouldn't last 10 minutes in the electromagnetic chaos those drones were known to generate. Iron, Sparrow's ancient electronics, were practically immune to modern jamming. The same pilots who mocked her old bird now watched with guarded hope. She taxied into position, fingers drumming the throttle. The ground crew scattered for cover as she pushed the throttle forward. The roar was raw, primal. The Sparrow jumped. The runway like a predator loosed from its cage. Mid-air chaos. The swarm looked like a cloud of starlings, tiny specks that moved with eerie coordination. Her radar flickered useless static. She flipped it off. Trust the eyes, trust the feel, her father's voice whispered. She lined up her first pass. Machine guns chattered from her undercarriage, tracers stitching the sky. Drones scattered, then regrouped, weaving intricate patterns that danced away from her sights. They dove at her wings, one clipped the stabilizer, sending Iron Sparrow into a juddering spin. She forced the yoke steady, breathing slow, counting seconds between maneuvers. Another drone burst under her gunfire, a pinprick of light swallowed by storm. Audience prompt. Comment, if you know precision beats brute force every time. Below her, base defenses flared to life. Mara patched coordinates through the battered coms, each breath a fight against static. Focus fire on the left flank. They're clustering near the fuel depot. An explosion bloomed like a second Sun 1 drone downed, but a firestorm erupted near the storage tanks. Mara's eyes narrowed. She banked Iron Sparrow so hard her harness cut into her shoulders, bringing the battered jet around for another pass. Inside the cockpit, warning lights screamed. Hydraulic pressure bottomed out. She rerouted power through the old manual overrider system the engineers said had been dead for years. She forced the jet into a dive, tracers finding another drone, then another. Each kill made the Sparrow shudder like a dying animal. Her teeth rattled in her skull. Sweat stung her eyes. A final drone broke formation, beelining for the control tower. Mara slammed the throttle to afterburner. The Sparrow howled protest. She squeezed the trigger empty. She flicked the missile arming switch, one lone air-to-air rocket left. Crosshairs danced across her canopy. She exhaled. One shot, calm hands, she fired. The missile streaked through the storm, trailing vapor. A heartbeat later, the drone exploded, debris pelting Iron Sparrow's fuselage, resolution and reflection. Base sirens faded to silence. Mara limped Iron Sparrow home, engines coughing their last breath as she touched down. The rain washed over the canopy as she sat motionless, breath fogging the cracked glass. The hangar doors opened. Alvarez waited, arms crossed. No smirk this time, only a grudging respect. Mara climbed down the ladder, legs shaking but her eyes clear. She ran a hand along Iron Sparrow's battered side, a silent promise echoing in her chest. She turned to the crew gathered in the drizzle. Patch her up. We're not done yet. End of part 3. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Cold open hook. Rain dripped from Iron Sparrow's battered wing as Mara crouched beneath it, the smell of scorched metal clinging to her flight suit like a second skin. The hangar was alive with an energy that felt electric, part disbelief, part dawning realization. She could feel it in every glance, every half-muttered word that rippled through the crew gathered around the old fighter jet. The woman they'd once pegged as the medic who belonged behind a desk was now the pilot, who'd outflown a drone swarm and a relic they'd written off for scrap. But there was no time for celebration. Not with the next threat already brewing beyond the compound's fences. Backstory. Thread. She wiped a smear of hydraulic fluid from her cheek, her mind drifting back to nights spent hunched over sniper blueprints with her father. He'd always said the shot you feared the most was the one you needed to take. She felt that fear now coiled under her ribs like a warning, but there was no room to flinch. Not when the men and women she'd rescued now waited to see if she'd hold the line again. Decker's voice jolted her back. "Lieutenant, you've got to see this." She followed him to the base ops center, where a ragged collection of screens flickered with satellite feeds. Alvarez leaned over the display, brow furrowed. Rogue elements regrouping. Looks like they're planning to hit the supply convoy on the eastern ridge. If they get that fuel, they'll box us in tight. We'll be blind and grounded. Inciting incident. The pilots who'd mocked her now stood stone-faced. A low murmur passed between them. Nobody was volunteering to fly out there in the middle of a fresh storm front with half the modern jets still grounded for repairs. Mara felt every gaze settle on her. She crossed her arms over her slender chest, eyes flicking to Iron Sparrow on the feed, a smudge of a relic, battered but still standing. "Sir," she said, voice even, "I'll take her up." Alvarez's jaw flexed. "You're pushing your luck, Quinn." "Luck's not flying this bird, sir." "I am," audience prompt. "Drop a if you'd bet everything on your own skill when no one else would." Silence. Then, with a grunt, Alvarez gave a short nod. "You've got 2 hours. Decker, get her whatever she needs." God help us all. Pre-flight prep. The storm outside gathered teeth as the maintenance crew crawled over Iron Sparrow's fuselage. Mara was there with them, sleeves rolled up, fingers scraping knuckles raw as she replaced seals and bypassed burnt-out circuits. The old girl's fuselage rattled like an old soldier's cough. "Think she hold?" Decker asked, voice muffled under the whine of a power drill. Mara looked up at the fighter's weathered lines. "She doesn't have to hold. She just has to keep fighting." Inside her helmet, Mara brushed her thumb over the small patch sewn to the lining, her mother's unit insignia, faded but unbroken. Calm hands in crisis. Every second matters. Takeoff. As the wheels left the rain-slick runway, Mara felt the familiar shudder run through the airframe, a handshake between old bones and new threats. Clouds closed around her like a fist. The instruments flickered, then steadied under her touch. Her eyes scanned the darkness for the convoy's heat signature. Static buzzed in her headset, Alvarez's voice cutting through. Convoys pinned down at Switchback Pass, hostiles closing in. If they lose that fuel, we're blind. Out here. The fight. She spotted the convoy trucks jammed between sheer cliffs, their headlights tiny pinpricks in the dark. Drones buzzed like hornets above them, tracer rounds stitching the road. Iron Sparrow roared low over the pass, guns blazing. She counted every round her father's lesson in discipline echoing in each squeeze of the trigger. One drone exploded in a spray of fire. Another clipped her wing. The old girl rattled but stayed aloft. Audience prompt. Comment, if you'd stand your ground no matter how battered you get. A burst of static. Then the convoy leader's voice. "We're jammed in." Rockslides blocked the pass. Mara's mind raced. She banked Iron Sparrow tight, skimming so low she could see the frightened faces below. She flipped the switch for her remaining rockets. Targeting was fried, but she didn't need computers, just instinct. She remembered her father's breath, steady through the rifle scope. "One shot, Quinn. Make it count." She fired. The rocket slammed into the rock face above the jammed trucks, blasting debris clear of the road. Through the smoke, the convoy lurched forward. Above her, more drones regrouped, the air filled with tracers. Iron Sparrow's engine screamed as it gulped the last of its fuel reserves. Mara rerouted power, ignoring the flickering oil pressure. Light, resolution, and reflection. As the convoy rolled clear, Mara's breath shuddered in her chest. Iron Sparrow rattled beneath her, wings groaning from fresh hits. She angled for base, engines sputtering. The radio crackled Alvarez again. "Convoy safe. We owe you, Quinn." She couldn't answer, her throat locked tight with relief and exhaustion. Iron Sparrow limped down the runway, brakes screeching. When she climbed out, the crew waited in the pouring rain. They didn't cheer. They didn't jeer. They just stood there, watching a relic and the woman who refused to let it die. Mara ran a hand along the battered wing, her voice a whisper only the storm could hear. "We're not done yet, old girl. Not by a long shot." End of part 4. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Cold Open Hook. The dawn cracked open like a shell over the battered compound as Mara stood alone on the rain-slick tarmac, the Iron Sparrow looming behind her like a scarred sentinel that refused to die. A thin mist clung to the runway, swirling around her boots as the early light fought through the storm's ragged remnants. The engines still ticked as they cooled, a restless, mechanical heartbeat that echoed the one in her chest. Last night's mission had cemented one truth. Iron Sparrow wasn't just a relic now, it was a symbol. And symbols had a way of putting targets on your back. Backstory thread. As she peeled off her flight gloves, she remembered her mother's voice in a field hospital during a siege, how she'd spoken calm words over the chaos while shrapnel rattled the tent walls. "They'll always test you, Mara. Every time you survive, you're proof that fear isn't stronger than resolve." The echo of that lesson clung to her now as she caught sight of Commander Alvarez marching toward her, a folded dispatch in his hand. His expression was grim, worse than usual. Mara, inside, now. Inside the briefing room, the air was stale, buzzing with tension. A wall of pinned-up satellite images flickered under harsh fluorescent lights. Alvarez slapped the dispatch on the table. "Intercepts confirm it. The rogue faction isn't done. They're regrouping beyond the eastern hills, and they've secured heavy artillery. If they breach the ridge, they'll have a clear line to the fuel silos and comms relays. We'd be blind, deaf, and out of fuel. We can't let that happen." Around the table, the same pilots who'd once mocked Mara avoided her eyes now. "Ah." Heavy silence thickened. Nobody volunteered. Inciting incident. Mara felt that familiar coil tighten in her gut. "What about our birds?" "Two still flight ready," Decker piped up. "But Iron Sparrow's the only one with the endurance for a prolonged recon and interdiction. The rest? They'll stall halfway out." Alvarez didn't look at her as he muttered, "You've already risked your neck 3 times in 2 days, Quinn. This isn't." She cut him off, voice level. "It's exactly my fight, sir. I'm taking her up." He slammed his cap down. "You do this, you're done for the week. No more hero stunts. Understood?" A thin smile touched her lips. "Understood." Audience prompt. Drop a "if." You'd run straight into danger rather than wait for it to come to you. Pre-flight prep. Back in the hangar, she found Decker waiting beside Iron Sparrow, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a battered toolbox at his feet. "You're gonna get her killed, you know," he grumbled. But his hands never stopped moving, patching coolant lines, tightening bolts, recalibrating the archaic targeting system. Mara knelt beside him, working shoulder to shoulder. She's already been dead 3 times over. She keeps choosing life. That's enough for me. Thunder rolled on the horizon as dawn crawled toward daylight. She checked the wing flaps manually, fingers blackened with old grease. She whispered under her breath, "Calm hands. One breath at a time." Takeoff. The runway glistened like obsidian under the rising sun. Mara strapped in, every buckle and harness groove feeling like a promise to the old fighter. Iron Sparrow shuddered as the engines turned over, a cough, a roar, then a guttural growl that sent vibrations up through her boots. She pushed the throttle, wheels screaming against wet asphalt. As she lifted off, the base shrank behind her, just a scattering of lights and steel teeth, daring the storm to come again. Mid-air chaos. Clouds swallowed the jet within minutes. Ice crusted along the leading edges. Instruments flickered. She adjusted trim manually, eyes flicking between the altimeter and the dark shapes forming ahead. The rogue encampment sprawled across the ridge, makeshift gun emplacements, armored trucks, and at least 2 drone launchers perched like vipers waiting to strike. She banked Iron Sparrow, angling for a better line. The old girl rattled in protest but held steady. Below, the ridge bristled with anti-air. Mara exhaled slow. This wasn't about outgunning them. It was about staying alive long enough to force them to scatter. She angled her first pass low and wide. Tracer rounds stitched the sky. One clipped her tail, sending the Sparrow into a gut-churning spin. She caught it, throttle dancing under her fingers. A missile lock warning screamed. She flipped shaft manually. Old systems, last resort. Audience. Prompt. Comment. If you'd trust your hands when the computer fails you. Her finger squeezed the release. Chaff burst in the storm clouds. The missile fizzled wide, detonating in a brilliant bloom behind her. She dove low, skimming treetops until branches rattled the undercarriage. The push. She circled back, targeting the biggest fuel truck they'd parked too close to the artillery nest. No auto-targeting, just instinct. She flipped her remaining rocket arm hot. The wind howled through a cracked canopy seam. Her father's voice again. One shot, Quinn. You're not looking for the biggest hit. You're looking for the shot. That breaks their nerve, she fired. The rocket streaked down, striking the fuel truck dead center. Fire ripped through the ridge. Ammo stores ignited in a chain reaction. Enemy fighters scattered for cover as the entire hillside bloomed into chaos. Resolution and reflection. Iron Sparrow limped through the turbulence, her right engine coughing like a dying lung. Mara kept her hands steady, every tremor in the stick met with calm breath. Below, the rogue forces fled, lines broken, artillery abandoned. The convoy wouldn't threaten the silos tonight. She banked for home, the compound lights blinking through ragged clouds like a promise. When she touched down, Iron Sparrow rolled to a wheezing stop at the hangar's mouth. Decker was there, rain dripping from his cap, eyes wide. You're gonna run out of 9 lives, Lieutenant. Mara peeled off her helmet, lips twitching into a tired smile. Good thing this old girl's got a few more than that. She pressed a palm to Iron Sparrow's fuselage, whispering to the steel and rivets that had carried her through fire once again. Not done yet, not by a long shot. End of part 5. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Cold open hook. The hangar doors rattled like drums as the wind drove rain sideways across the compound. Inside, Mara stood beneath Iron Sparrow's wing, the smell of scorched hydraulics and jet fuel clinging to her flight suit like a second skin. Outside, dawn was just a smear of gray over the mountains. Inside, the crew buzzed around her like nervous hornets, half in awe, half in disbelief that the old fighter and its pilot had limped back one more time. She ignored their stares. She had a new mission to plan. Backstory thread. As she traced her fingers along a fresh crack in Iron Sparrow's fuselage, she thought of her father's weathered sniper rifle. He'd always told her the rifle was just a partner. It didn't do the job alone. The steel and the shooter shared the burden of every bullet. Iron Sparrow had become that rifle to her, battered but willing, so long as she was. A cough behind her pulled her back to the present. Decker, grease-streaked and grim, held up a warped panel. This intake's about to tear itself clean off. You want to fly again today, you'll need to reinforce the housing by hand. She wiped her hands on her thigh, grabbed the panel. Then we'd better get started. They worked in silence, the steady clink of wrenches and whine of drills filling the space between them. Mara's knuckles split, blood mixing with grime. She didn't flinch. Inciting incident. Alvarez appeared at the hangar entrance, flanked by 2 officers. His face was a mask neutral but strained. "Quinn, we need eyes in the southern pass. Recon drone went dark 20 minutes ago. We think they're testing new anti-air jammers. If they get close enough, we're cut off from the main relay tower. You know what that means." Mara stood, wiping sweat from her brow. "It means Iron Sparrow and I are going up." Alvarez shifted his weight, jaw clenching. "You've already flown 3 missions in 24 hours. You're running on adrenaline and stubbornness. One more hit and that bird won't carry you back." She stepped closer, voice steady. "Sir, you said it yourself. No eyes means no base. We can't afford to be blind." He sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose. "One run, Quinn. Get in, get out. If you get shot down out there, we don't have the fuel or manpower to pull you out." Mara just nodded. "Understood." Audience prompt. "Drop a if you'd walk into the dark because no one else would. Pre-flight prep." The wind howled through the open hangar doors as she and Decker fastened the last bolt. He shot her a sideways glance. "You keep pushing her like this, you're both gonna come apart at the seams." Mara smirked. "Then I'd better hold her together a little longer." She climbed into the cockpit, running gloved hands over the cracked dials and scratched glass. Her mother's old patch stitched into her collar lining pressed against her neck like the steady heartbeat. Calm hands in chaos, always. Takeoff. Iron Sparrow's engines coughed, spat vapor, then caught with a rattling growl that seemed to say, "Not yet." She taxied down the runway, the compound shrinking behind her as the world opened up in gray and thunder. The moment the wheels lifted off, the static started signals jamming, lights blinking out on her comms console. Perfect dot. She adjusted the dials by touch, tracing the static like a blind sniper tracing wind currents. Below, the southern pass yawned wide, a maze of rock spines and valleys that could swallow a whole squadron without leaving a scrap. Mid-air, chaos. Suddenly, movement on her 6. Shadows darting low through the canyons. Enemy scout drones, small, fast and lethal in numbers. She banked hard, Iron Sparrow shuddering as the old airframe groaned against the G-forces. Tracer rounds stitched past her canopy. She flipped to manual targeting, no radar lock, just instinct. Her father's voice hummed through her pulse. "Trust your eyes, trust your breath." She squeezed the trigger. One drone spun out, exploding against a cliff face. 2 more danced in behind her. Her oil pressure light blinked red. She rerouted lines, flicked emergency valves, her fingers a blur. Audience prompt. Comment. If you know that when all the lights fail, instinct leads you home. The jammers cut her signal to base. She was alone now. Iron Sparrow rattled in protest as she pushed the nose down, hugging the canyon floor so tight that rocks scraped her undercarriage. She fired short. Bursts another drone down. The last clipped her wing, shredding an aileron. The stick bucked. In her hands like a live thing, she forced her breath steady. One breath at a time. She dove into the narrowest part of the pass, the drone riding her exhaust. With a flick of her wrist, she climbed wings barely clearing the stone. The drone miscalculated, slammed into the canyon wall. One heartbeat of silence. She climbed, searching for the source of the jamming. They're half hidden near an abandoned mining rig, a makeshift tower bristling with antennas. No missiles left. No backup, just Iron Sparrow and her. She banked again, angling the old girl's nose dead at the tower. The wind screamed through the cracked canopy. She squeezed the stick. Machine guns roared. Sparks flew as bullets tore through the jammers. The Static cleared. Her radio popped back to life. Alvarez's voice crackled in. "Quinn, report." She let out a breath that tasted like blood and ozone. "Southern pass is clear. Jammers down. Send the drones back up." Resolution and reflection. By the time Iron Sparrow limped home, the sun had clawed its way above the ridgeline. The hangar. Crew was waiting, Decker in front, Alvarez behind him. She climbed out, legs trembling, breath ragged but her eyes sharp. Alvarez looked at the scorched wings, the bullet holes, the oil leaks that dripped onto the tarmac like black rain. He just shook his head. "You're out of miracles, Lieutenant." She ran a hand along Iron Sparrow's battered nose. "Good thing we've still got grit." She looked over her shoulder at the crew gathering close, fear replaced by something new, trust. The kind that stuck. Under her breath, she whispered, "To the old jet, not done yet, not while they still need us. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." Cold open hook. The compound seemed to hold its breath as the wind howled across the battered tarmac, rattling the hangar doors like warning drums. Mara's boots echoed off the slick concrete as she walked the length of Iron Sparrow's scarred fuselage, fingertips brushing over fresh dents and scorched rivets. She felt the weight of every mission in her bones. The old fighter had no business being alive, and neither did she, if they measured survival by odds alone. Backstory thread. As she stood there, a memory flickered behind her eyes, her mother's hands, pressing gauze to a gunshot wound while mortar rounds thudded outside the tent. "You don't stop when you're tired, Mara. You stop when they're safe." Those words had become her marrow. The hangar bustled behind her crew, dragging in crates of spare parts, patching coolant, lines with scavenged bits from grounded birds. Decker approached, hands greasy, expression somewhere between exasperated and begrudgingly impressed. "You're pushing her past scrap." Another sortie like yesterday's, and she'll fall apart mid her. Mara turned, smudged grease across her sleeve. "She hold. She always does." Decker barked a laugh. "She's got your stubborn streak, that's for damn sure." Inciting incident. A fresh alarm blared through the compound's short, sharp pulses that silenced the hum of chatter. Mara looked past Decker to see Commander Alvarez striding across the hangar floor, a radio clenched tight in his hand. "Quinn, situation's escalated. Our outpost on the North Ridge just sent a distress signal. Small recon team pinned down by heavy patrol armored vehicles, drone coverage. They're cut off. If we lose them, we lose every pair of eyes we've got on enemy movements." Decker muttered under his breath, "They'll chew her up, Mara. That's suicide." Mara's eyes met Alvarez's. She didn't flinch. "Iron Sparrow's the only bird with the range and the guts for a low-altitude evac. I'm taking her up." Alvarez's jaw worked behind his clipped words. "One run, no heroics. We can't afford to fish you out of the forest if she goes down." Mara just smiled. "We won't go down." Audience prompt. Drop A if you'd fly into the storm to bring someone home. Pre-flight prep. Wind slammed rain sideways as she climbed onto the Sparrow's wing. Decker shouted over the roar, "You can't keep doing this." She's held together with duct tape and prayers. Mara cinched her harness tight, helmet pressing her hair flat. "Then find me better prayers." Iron Sparrow's engines shuddered awake like an old man coughing through a lungful of dust. She taxied down the runway, eyes locked on the gathering. Thunderheads, takeoff. The tires lifted off the rain-slick asphalt. The ground dropped away, replaced by the rolling black of the storm front. Lightning danced on the horizon. Inside the cockpit, every loose bolt, every rattling seam reminded her how thin the line was between daring and reckless. The radio crackled. "Lieutenant Quinn, you're coming up on the ridge." Enemy armors dug in near the tree line. Drones. On a search grid, radar jamming's intermittent. "Watch your six." Mara eased Iron Sparrow lower, hugging the treetops. The HUD flickered, half dead. She switched to manual, trusting her instincts, her pulse steady. Mid-air chaos. Through the canopy-streaked glass, she spotted the convoy 3 battered trucks, a scattering of soldiers pinned behind them as armored vehicles crept closer. Tracer rounds lanced skyward. One pinned off her port wing, jolting Iron Sparrow sideways. She fought the stick back under control, breath even. Calm hands always. She dove, machine guns blazing. Shells stitched the tree line, forcing the patrol into cover. A drone swung in behind her, tiny, agile. She jerked Iron Sparrow through. A brutal bank. Branches tearing at her landing gear. Audience prompt. Comment if you'd bet on courage when tech tries to outwit you. The drone clipped her tail, but she rolled hard, the Sparrow screaming protest as she leveled out. She caught the drone dead center in her sights and squeezed the trigger. The blast lit the treetops in a flash of orange. She looped back, flaps whining. Bravo team, move now, I'll cover. Below, the recon soldiers scrambled into the open. Mara dropped altitude so low the engines churned leaves into a cyclone. Gunfire rattled Iron Sparrow's belly. She ignored it, eyes locked on the ridgeline. A missile lock alarm screeched. She flipped chaff, nothing left. She pulled the throttle back, feathered the flaps, and coaxed Iron Sparrow into a rolling climb that strained every bolt. The missile streaked past, detonating harmlessly in the storm. She circled back, her voice hoarse over the coms. Convoy. Clear. Where's my corridor? The base's strained reply. Paths open west by southwest. It's tight but clear, if you can keep her airborne. Resolution and reflection. Mara angled Iron Sparrow into the corridor, battered wings fighting every gust. The recon trucks rumbled through the clearing below, racing for the base perimeter. When the last truck crossed the line, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Iron Sparrow shuddered the whole way home. Hydraulics bleeding pressure, fuel gauges dancing on empty dot. She touched down with a hard jolt that rattled her teeth. The moment the canopy lifted, rain poured in like a blessing. Alvarez stood waiting, no words, just a hand on her shoulder that said everything. Decker climbed the ladder, his grin crooked, eyes tired. Still think you'll get more miles out of her? Mara pressed a palm to Iron Sparrow's nose, feeling the battered steel warm under the storm's chill. She's more alive now than any of you gave her credit for. She glanced over the hangar, every mechanic, every pilot standing still, watching her and the relic that had brought their people home, under her breath, to the Sparrow alone. Not done yet. Not while we've still got fight in us. Cold open hook. Dawn bled across the runway in bruised streaks as Mara leaned against Iron Sparrow's battered wing. Steam rising from puddles that reflected the battered canopy above her dot. Every joint in her body ached like a protest. But the compound was stirring. She could hear the shuffle of boots, the clatter of tools, the hush of voices that weren't mocking her anymore, but whispering about what she'd do. Next, backstory thread. She pressed a palm to the fuselage, eyes closing for a heartbeat. She could almost feel her father's hands guiding hers over a sniper's bolt, her mother's voice steady in her ear while the world fell apart outside the medical tent. They'd built her for this piece by piece, breath by breath. A shout jolted her eyes open. Decker stomped across the hangar floor, cap askew, a wrench in one hand. Quinn, you're not gonna like this. She arched a brow. If it's about Iron Sparrow's fuel lines, I already hate it. He barked a laugh but didn't smile. It's worse. Command just got intel enemies moving heavy artillery through the East Canyon, trying to flank our ridge stations. They're using the weather to mask heat signatures. If they get those guns in place, they'll shell us blind. She dragged the back of her hand across her mouth, smearing grease. How long? Decker shrugged. Hours, maybe less. Inciting incident. Alvarez appeared beside Decker, his eyes bloodshot from a night with no sleep. We've got one recon drone that might spot them. It's low on power and the storms are frying its uplink. Mara's mind already turned over options like a puzzle box. Iron Sparrow's radar is half dead, but her old manual systems can cut through interference. I can get close enough to mark targets for artillery. Decker swore under his breath. You'll be flying right into the teeth of it, Mara. You've patched that wing 3 times already. If it tears, she didn't flinch. If it tears, I'll glide her home. Alvarez ran a hand over his face. You've got 1 shot. After this, she's grounded until we get parts from Base Delta. And so are you. Mara's lips twitched. We'll see. Audience prompt. Drop us. You'd fly one more impossible mission. Just to protect what matters. Pre-flight prep. The storm was already creeping in. Thick clouds rolling down the mountain pass like a living thing. Mara strapped in, the cockpit's cracked edges pressing into her shoulders like old scars. Decker's voice came through her headset as she taxied to the runway. Try to bring her back in one piece, Lieutenant. She smirked. No promises. Take off. The Sparrow's engines rattled and roared. She lifted off into the storm, rain pelting the canopy so hard it sounded like static in her ears. The uplink from the recon drone flickered across her console. Ghost images. Half-clear coordinates. She switched to manual, reading terrain by instinct and memory. The canyons below twisted like an old scar, narrow, shadowed. Perfect for an ambush. The artillery convoy crawled along the canyon floor, half concealed by tarps and camo netting. She dipped low, skimming rock spires so close they scraped paint. From the undercarriage, mid-air chaos, a burst of gunfire rattled the fuselage's small arms from hidden infantry. Iron Sparrow shuddered, but held steady. Mara's breath slowed, hands feathering the throttle. Trust the feel. 1 breath at a time. She flipped the comms to the base battery. Coordinates incoming. Mark these trucks. Tracer fire stitched. The air, a new threat. Armored flatbeds with mobile guns pivoting skyward. She banked hard, flak exploding where she'd been seconds before. 1 wing stuttered. She countered with the rudder, the stick bucking in her hands. Her mother's words whispered in the roar. Calm in the storm. Always. Audience prompt. Comment if you know the best shot is the one that costs you everything. She lined up her camera sight, relaying coordinates even as rounds peppered the Sparrow's belly. 1 AA shell grazed her tail, metal shrieked. She fought the spin, breath even, eyes locked on the next target. Base comms crackled. Artillery locked, standing by on your mark. Mara looped around, engines coughing. Now, thunder rolled. Seconds later, the ridgeline erupted in fire as friendly shells found the convoy. Secondary explosions ripped through the canyon, sending smoke and debris skyward. She circled once more, confirming the guns were gone. Resolution and reflection. But Iron Sparrow wasn't done bleeding yet. A coolant line burst, steam hissed into the cockpit. The old girl bucked and rattled, wings trembling like a dying bird. She coaxed her higher, nose angled for home. Each mile felt like a lifetime. When the runway finally appeared through the storm's ragged edge, she lined up the landing with her whole body, fingers locked, breath shallow. The wheels screeched. The Sparrow shuddered, but they stayed together. 1 more time. Decker was there when she climbed out, drenched, grinning despite himself. You're gonna be the death of this bird. Mara ran a hand over the scorched metal. Not today. Alvarez appeared behind him. We hold that ridge because of you. But you're both grounded until we get new parts. Understood? She met. His eyes unflinching. Understood. She pressed her palm flat against Iron Sparrow's battered wing, rain dripping from her helmet to the tarmac. Not done yet, old friend. Not while they still need us. Cold open hook. Thunder rattled the hangar's corrugated walls as Mara stood alone with Iron Sparrow. Rain sluicing off the battered fuselage like blood washing from an old wound. The compound pulsed with new, urgency, fresh rumors of an enemy. Push. Chatter of supply lines under threat. Yet in this steel cocoon, it was just her, the smell of scorched oil, and the steady drip of rain on metal. Backstory thread. She remembered nights hunched over her father's battered rifle, oiling the bolt as he talked her through wind and trajectory. You don't need the best weapon, Mara. You need to understand the one you've got, inside and out. Iron Sparrow was no different, old, tired, but known in her bones. She pressed her palm to the fuselage, felt the vibrations of a machine that shouldn't fly but did. Decker's boots scuffed across the slick concrete. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Recon drone came back with fresh scans. They're flanking again. Supply trucks 2 ridges over. If they fall, we lose ammo for the west barricade. Mara didn't move her hand from the wing. How many birds can fly? 3. None with Sparrow's endurance. Inciting incident. Commander Alvarez's voice cut through the shadows. Lieutenant Quinn, we need an escort run. High risk. No support if you get pinned. Mara's jaw flexed. Iron Sparrow's grounded. Decker snorted. That's what the paperwork says. But paperwork never kept you from rewiring half her guts before, did it? Alvarez threw up his hands. You're both crazy, but we need that convoy. If you say she fly, you get 1 shot. Mara's fingers hit the battered fuselage. She fly. Audience prompt. Drop a if you'd risk your last chance to keep people fed and armed. Pre-flight prep. The rain intensified. Drumming on the hangar roof like distant artillery. Decker worked beside her, sleeves soaked, eyes squinting in the dim light. They patched fuel lines with old clamps, scavenged wires from dead drones. Last time, Quinn, he muttered. Next time she falls apart, she's staying down. Mara didn't argue. She just bolted the last panel in place and climbed the ladder. Takeoff. Iron Sparrow rattled awake like a wounded beast, engines coughing into a reluctant growl. She taxied through puddles, the compound shrinking behind her as the wheels left the runway. The wind hit her full force. She angled west, eyes scanning for the convoy's heat signatures in the dark. Radios crackled with static partial coordinates. Half-shouted orders. Mid-air chaos. Below, the convoy crawled through switchbacks like ants on a cracked plate. Shadows shifted in the tree-lined enemy scouts. Mara dipped low, flaps whining. Tracer rounds stitched the air. Iron Sparrow bucked as rounds pinged off her belly. Calm hands, she whispered. Her mother's voice echoed in the roar. Stitch the wound, hold the line. She opened the coms. Convoy push through. I'll keep their heads down. Small arms fire sparked along the ridge. She nosed down, machine guns barking. The old girl's recoil rattled her teeth. Scouts scattered. An RPG streaked past her wing too close. Warning lights flared on the dash. Decker's patchwork repairs strained but held. She banked hard, fighting the spin. Audience prompt. Comment if you'd bet everything on something. Everyone else rode off. Ahead, a roadblock, a wrecked truck, bristling with gunmen. She flipped the last rocket arm hot. Crosshairs danced. 1 shot. She squeezed the trigger. The rocket smashed into the barricade, clearing a path. The convoy lurched forward, engines screaming over the coms, but Iron Sparrow didn't escape unscathed. A fuel line ruptured mid-wing. She rerouted flow, coaxing every ounce from the tanks. The convoy rumbled onto clear ground, disappearing into the dark toward the base. Resolution and reflection. Mara angled Iron Sparrow for home, the engine shuddering, the wings trembling like brittle paper. Each gust of wind threatened to break her apart. She feathered the throttle, breath steady. The compound's lights winked through the storm. She whispered to the battered metal, "Almost there, old girl." Wheels kissed wet tarmac. With a screech that vibrated through her spine, she coasted to a stop at the hangar mouth, engine coughing to silence. Decker climbed the ladder, shaking his head, eyes shining. One more miracle. Alvarez stepped forward, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. No lecture this time. Just a nod. You bought us another day. We'll make it count. Mara pressed her palm flat against Iron Sparrow's side, her voice so soft only the battered steel could hear. Not done yet. Not while they need us. Cold open hook. The storm returned with a vengeance, wind lashing the compound as if trying to peel the old fighter from its resting place. Mara crouched beneath Iron Sparrow's wing, rain drumming her helmet, eyes locked on the battered panels. She'd come to know better than her own reflection. Backstory thread. She remembered her mother's voice against soft words over the buzz of a field generator, telling her that true steadiness wasn't never being afraid, but acting like you weren't when it mattered most. That steadiness had carried her through every reckless sortie, every impossible spin, every miracle Iron Sparrow had given her. But there were only so many miracles left. Decker stomped up, boots splashing through puddles. Quinn, command wants you in ops, now. Inside the briefing room, Commander Alvarez stood beside a flickering map. Red markers dotted the screen, far too many, clustered dangerously close to the base perimeter. Enemies mounting a push tonight, he said, voice low. They found a gap on the south ridge. Scout drones spotted them massing. If they breach that slope, they'll overrun our comms and fuel. Decker cursed under his breath. No chance our ground teams can hold? Alvarez's silence said it all. Mara crossed her arms over her chest, the chill in the room finding no place to land in her bones. Iron Sparrow can fly it. Alvarez's gaze snapped to her. No, Quinn, she's done. You barely limped back last run. We don't even have enough avgas to risk another full sortie. She didn't blink. Then we don't run a full sortie. We run one that counts. Inciting incident. A hush fell over the room. Alvarez looked at Decker, then at Mara. Explain. She stepped forward, jabbing a finger at the ridgeline on the map. We can't hold that slope head on. But if we bottleneck them in the narrows with a single pass, we buy enough time to reinforce the comms bunker. We hit their lead column, jam their advance, and funnel them into a kill zone for ground artillery. Decker's voice rasped. One pass, Mara. That's all you'll get. If they hit you mid-run. She glanced at the patch inside her flight suit collar, frayed edges pressing warm against her neck. Then they hit me. But they don't get through. Audience prompt. Drop as you'd stand between danger and the people who count on you. Pre-flight prep. Rain hammered the hangar roof like drumfire. Mechanics swarmed Iron Sparrow, jury-rigging seals with duct tape and wire. Decker barked orders over the noise. When he reached her side, his shoulders slumped. You're out of luck and time. Quinn, she goes down tonight, you go with her. She shrugged. We've made peace with that. He smacked her helmet lightly. No, you haven't. That's why you keep coming back. Takeoff. The old girl's engines wheezed awake one final stubborn roar that felt like a challenge to the storm. Mara taxied through sheets of rain, eyes flicking to the distant ridge. The radio crackled. Alvarez's voice, steady. Kill zone set. Artillery locked in. Make it count, Lieutenant. She whispered to Iron Sparrow's throttle. Let's dance. Old friend. Wheels lifted off slick asphalt. The base fell away behind her like a bad memory. Ahead, lightning stitched the sky above a forest crawling with enemy armor. Mid-air. Chaos. Her radar was useless jammers painted static across her dials. She went by gut, every muscle tuned to the Sparrow's rattles and groans. There, the convoy. Snaking up the ridge trail, headlights flickering through mist. She angled lower, the fuselage rattling so hard it blurred her vision. Anti-air fire bloomed beneath her. She jinked right, flares popping her last. A shell clipped her undercarriage hydraulics. Screamed. She forced her breath calm. Flaps down, nose angled. Guns primed. Audience prompt. Comment if you'd bet everything on one pass that could change everything. Tracer rounds lit the sky. She squeezed the trigger. Machine guns hammered the lead trucks, shells tearing through troop carriers. Explosions rocked the slope. Enemy vehicles jammed up behind the wreckage, smoke choking the trail. A drone locked onto her six. She banked hard, Sparrow screaming protest. Another shell whistled past her canopy. Shrapnel spattered the fuselage. Red warning lights bloomed across her dash. Below, the ridge burned. She flicked the coms. Target jammed. Artillery now. Base. Batteries answered with thunder. The ridge trail erupted in fire. Earth and steel ripped apart. Mara fought the yoke. Iron Sparrow bucked like a dying stallion. Her vision blurred as the altimeter spun wild. She clenched her teeth. Hold it, hold it. She angled south, skimming the treetops. 1 more mile. 1 more minute. Resolution and reflection. The runway appeared through the storm like a promise. She lined up the descent, hands steady despite the shaking stick. Wheels slammed the tarmac. Iron Sparrow screamed, sparks trailing behind them. They rolled to a stop inside the hangar mouth. Mechanics swarmed her ladder before she even popped the canopy. Decker grabbed her arm, breathless. The ridge held. You bottled them up. We bought the time. Mara slid from the cockpit, boots hitting wet concrete. She ran her palm across the battered wing. She gave me 1 more. 1 more. Alvarez appeared, soaked, eyes wide. Rest, Quinn. Rest. You've earned it. She just smiled, rain washing the grime from her cheeks. She whispered to Iron Sparrow, her voice almost lost to the storm. Not done yet. Not while they still need us. Cold open hook. The wind howled through the hangar's broken windows as Mara sat cross-legged beneath Iron Sparrow's wing. Her back pressed to battered metal that felt warmer than the concrete floor beneath her. The old jet was silent now more. Patches then plain. Panels bolted on at strange angles. The scars of a dozen impossible missions etched into every rivet. Backstory thread. She could almost feel her mother's cool fingers on her temple, pressing away fever under desert canvas. Rest is earned, not given. But you still have to take it when it comes. Her mother never had. Neither did her father. She smiled faintly at that truth. Decker's footsteps scuffed the floor. He squatted beside her, tool belt jangling. Quinn, you need sleep. And we both know you're not getting it down here. Mara's voice was a ragged whisper. Sleep. Can wait. The ridge bought us a day, maybe 2. Decker glanced at Iron Sparrow's shredded wing flaps. And then? Inciting incident. A shout cut through the echoing bay. An officer, panting from a run, burst into the light. Ma'am! Recon drones just picked up armored columns rerouting through the low marshlands. They're bypassing our barricades. If they reach the northern fuel dump, we're dead in the water. Decker swore so violently, Mara almost laughed. She stood, boots squeaking on the slick floor. Commander, no? Yeah, says the air defense net is offline again. We've got 2 choppers we can scramble, but they can't carry enough munitions to break a column that size. She turned to Decker. Iron Sparrow? He threw up his hands. She's on her last leg, Mara. 1 hard pull, and that wing will shear clean off. Mara's eyes flicked to the patch inside her collar, edges threadbare. She fly. She has to. Audience prompt. Drop a if you'd push 1 last mile for the people who'd never see it coming. Pre-flight prep. Sparks flew from a welder's torch as Decker and the crew worked furiously, reinforcing the left wing spar with a cannibalized strut from a grounded jet. Rain battered the open hangar doors like the drumming of far-off mortar. You'll lose maneuverability on roll, Decker warned, sweat dripping from his brow. She won't turn like before. Mara adjusted her helmet, voice steady. Then, I won't turn. Take off. The compound felt like a ghost town as she taxied to the runway. Alvarez's voice cracked through the coms. Quinn, make it count. And bring her home. I always do, she said. Iron Sparrow's engine stuttered to life, each note a promise and a threat. She pushed the throttle, felt the roar rumble through her ribs. The battered jet clawed into the air, trailing mist through the dark, mid-air. Chaos. The marshland spread below, a web of black water and shifting lights. Enemy armor rolled single file along a causeway half visible under the clouds. Mara dropped lower, wings skimming mist. Her radar was dead, but she didn't need it. Tracer fire erupted. Bullets ripped across the Sparrow's belly. She forced, her breath steady. Flaps groaned as she dipped under the area range. The old girl bucked as crosswinds tugged at the damaged wing. She angled her guns, eyes tracing headlights through the haze. She squeezed the trigger. Shells stitched the causeway. One armored truck burst, debris tumbling into the swamp. An enemy drone locked on her 6. No flares left. She banked hard, what the patched wing could manage, rolling into the drone's flight path. Machine guns rattled. Sparks lit the marsh. Audience. Prompt. Comment. If you've ever risked the last piece of you to protect something bigger. She angled for another pass. Hydraulics bled pressure. Red lights bloomed across the dash. She felt the stick tighten in her hands like steering. Through syrup. Below, the convoy scattered into reeds and shallows, trying to find cover. Mara's breath rasped against her mic. One more, girl. Give me one more. She dove, lined up the lead tank, and fired. The blast rocked the tree line. Secondary explosions bloomed in the marsh like jagged stars. Her headset crackled. Northern fuel dump reports no contact. Convoy neutralized. She exhaled, a sound closer to a sob than a laugh. Resolution and reflection. Iron Sparrow limped home through a dawn that glowed sullen behind the clouds. Each shudder felt like a goodbye. But the runway appeared ahead, wet, cracked, waiting. She coaxed the landing gear down by hand. Sparks spat as wheels hit asphalt. They rolled to a stop half inside the hangar. Decker climbed up, eyes wide, breathless. You did it. You crazy. Mara rested her forehead against the cracked canopy. She did it. When she climbed out, the whole hangar crew was waiting. No words, just hands clapping her shoulders, patting Iron Sparrow's battered flanks. Alvarez approached, eyes glistening with fatigue and relief. Rest, Quinn. Really rest. No more miracles tonight. She smiled, palm flat against scorched steel. Not done yet. Not while they still need us. Cold open hook. Dawn broke in fractured streaks of pink and gray, washing over Iron Sparrow's battered frame like light on old bones. Mara stood on the tarmac, boots sinking in rain puddles, hand pressed to the fuselage that had become her. Spine around her, the base stirred with the muffled chaos of the too tired, too wired. Supply trucks growled past. Medics hustled the wounded. Mechanics traded jokes too quiet to carry. But Mara felt none of it, only the soft hum of a jet that had never been just a jet. Backstory thread. She could still feel her father's breath steady in her ear when she'd first fired his sniper rifle. Nothing is unbreakable, Mara, but sometimes what you patch together holds longer than the things built new. Iron Sparrow was proof. So was she. A voice cut through the hum. Decker, shoulders hunched, eyes rimmed red. Quinn, command wants you inside. She looked past him, to where Commander Alvarez waited by the briefing room doors, his face an unreadable mask. Inciting incident. The map glowed with fresh markers, red dots clustered along the southern ridge, dangerously close to the airfields. Fuel reserves. Alvarez cleared his throat, voice scraping like gravel. They're making one final push. If they break the ridge, they'll level the airfield. We can't evacuate our wounded, can't resupply. We'll be choked out. Decker crossed his arms, shooting Mara a sidelong glance. We've got drones, but they can't punch through the jamming. And the new birds? Still grounded. Only one. Flying relic can get in low enough. Alvarez's gaze pinned her. One more run, Lieutenant Quinn. You say the word. Mara didn't even blink. She fly. Decker spat on the floor. You keep saying that. One day she won't. Mara laid a hand flat on his shoulder. That's not today. Audience prompt. Drop a. If you'd stand with something old and battered when everyone else says it's finished. Pre-flight prep. The mechanics swarmed Iron Sparrow like ants rebuilding a dying anthill, patching hydraulic lines with old garden hose clamps, securing torn fuselage seams with borrowed bolts. Decker worked beside her, knuckles raw. This wing root's about to shear. You'll lose half your lift if she takes one more hit. Mara's smirk was almost gentle. Then, I'll fly straight. Takeoff. The runway stretched slick and black, winds slapping her canopy as the Sparrow's engines caught a cough, a rattle, then that throat-ripping growl that never failed to make her heart thump in her ribs. Alvarez's voice came through. The comms thin with static. This is it, Quinn. Ridge or ruin. Copy that, she whispered. Ridge. Mid-air chaos. Clouds swallowed her whole, rain streaking the canopy like tracer lines. The ridge unfolded below, a spine of stone and trees. Through her failing sensors, she could see heat signatures, enemy vehicles crawling up narrow switchbacks. Their shadows blinking in the fog. A fire flared like fireworks. The Sparrow jolted. A hole the size of her fist punched through the right wing. She wrestled the stick, teeth bared. Machine guns rattled under her belly. She dove, stitched the lead convoy with shells until one truck erupted in flames, blocking the path. She looped wide. A drone locked onto her tail. With no flares, she dipped low, hugging the ridge's backbone. Tree limbs whipped at the fuselage, but the Sparrow held. Audience prompt. Comment if you'd bet on instinct when the tech gives up. One more pass, one more shot. She circled the burning wreckage, found the artillery nest hidden under camo netting. She flipped the last missile switch. Crosshairs danced, her breath stilled. One shot. Her father's whisper. She fired. The rocket slammed into the nest. A fireball rolled skyward, shaking the ridge like an earthquake. Below, enemy lines wavered. The push buckled. Radios crackled. Quinn, ridge is holding. They're pulling back. She exhaled, fingers trembling on the throttle. But Iron Sparrow shuddered, warning lights flaring red across the dash. A fuel line hemorrhaged vapor. Hydraulics bottomed out. The stick went soft in her hands. Resolution and reflection. She coaxed her battered bird toward base. Each mile was a plea. Each gust of wind felt like it might snap them both in half. When the runway appeared, cracked, battered, lit by flickering perimeter lamps, she angled her approach by instinct. Alone. Wheels touched. Sparks flew. The Sparrow bounced, then rolled. To a stop halfway down the strip, Mara popped the canopy. Rain slapped her face, mixing with tears she hadn't felt coming. Below, Alvarez and Decker waited, frozen in place. She climbed down, boots hitting slick tarmac. Decker grabbed her arm, voice raw. You insane! She pressed a palm to Iron Sparrow's battered nose, lips moving so only the old girl could hear. Not done yet. Not while they still need us. Cold open hook. The storm broke at dawn, leaving the runway slick and steaming as Mara leaned her forehead against Iron Sparrow's battered cockpit glass, eyes squeezed shut against the morning light. The old jet was silent now, wounds patched. With plate steel, hydraulics leaking drop by drop onto the tarmac. Around her, the compound held its breath. Engineers, medics, the ground crew no one said the word done aloud. But she could feel it pressing at the edge of every glance. Backstory thread. She thought of her mother stitching wounds in a field hospital, of her father's steady hands on cold steel. Neither had been given long lives, but both had chosen. Every moment. Iron Sparrow had taught her that again, how to choose when you're out of miracles but not out of fight. Decker limped up, holding a battered clipboard. His eyes were rimmed red. It's worse than I thought. Right intakes cracked through the casing. Rudders buckled. She's not flying again, Mara. Mara's fingers traced the ragged seams. She will, even if you got her airborne. She'd fall apart the second you banked. She's held too much for too long. Mara said nothing. But inside, the choice had already been made. Inciting incident. Commander Alvarez stepped into the circle of silence. Radio pressed to his ear. His face was pale, voice tight. New intel. They're massing armor and drones for one last push. If they breach our western wall, every line we've held breaks. It's the end. Decker's voice cracked. You can't, she can't, Mara. Looked at him, quiet steel in her eyes. She's all we have. Alvarez opened his mouth, closed it again, then gave a slow nod. One last run. Audience prompt, drop a, if you'd stand one more time when they say you're finished. Pre-flight prep. They cannibalized every scrap they could find stripped, wiring from dead birds. Welded plate after plate onto Iron Sparrow's cracked frame. Mara worked beside them, grease grinding into her skin. Her gloves stuck to her hands like old bandages. Decker's voice rasped over the clatter. You're gonna kill her, Quinn. Mara didn't look up. She knows. When the last bolt turned, she climbed the ladder, pausing at the canopy to rest her palm on the battered steel. One more. That's all I ask. Take off. The runway lights flickered as dawn split the horizon. Iron Sparrow's engines coughed. Sputtered, then caught, a ragged roar that shivered the windows. Alvarez's voice crackled through her headset. Target convoy spotted on the south approach. If they break through, we're done. Bring them to their knees. Mara flexed her gloved hands over the throttle. Copy that. Iron Sparrow rattled down the strip, wheels kissing asphalt one last time. The battered bird clawed at the sky. Each foot of altitude, promise and a threat. Mid-air chaos. Below, the convoy crawled up the ridgeline like a snake of steel. Tracer rounds flicked at her undercarriage. Radar was dead. Instruments flickered. She flew by feel alone. A drone locked on her tail. She rolled rudder, screamed protest, but the old girl held. She lined up her guns, squeezed the trigger. Empty. Come on, she rasped, flicking switches by memory. One last missile armed its targeting system half broken. Breathe. One shot. Her father's ghost. Crosshairs danced. The ridge blurred. She let the shot go. The missile spiraled, wobbled, then struck the Leda PC dead center. Fire blossomed. The convoy jammed up behind the wreckage. Anti-air fire exploded around her. The canopy cracked. Oil sprayed across the dash. Iron Sparrow pitched into his spin controls. Went slack in her hands. Resolution and reflection. The runway was a dream behind her eyelids. She fought the spin, coaxed the dying hydraulics back with soft hands and whispered curses. The base perimeter appeared, a mess of sandbags, trucks, and waiting shadows. She angled the nose, landing gears screaming into place. The first wheel touched, bounced, touched again. The Sparrow skidded sideways, metal shrieking, sparks fanning the rain-soaked tarmac. They stopped half off the strip. Smoke coiled from the engine. Every rivet hummed with silence as she popped the canopy. The wind hit her like a baptism. Decker reached her first, eyes wide, breathless. Alvarez stood behind him, helmet in his hands. Nobody spoke. They didn't need. Mara slid her palm across Iron Sparrow's battered frame, warm metal, cold rain. We did it, old friend. We did it. She turned to the men and women gathered around. The crew who'd once called her crazy, reckless, a fool for trusting an old bird. Get ready, she said. Her voice was steady, unshaken. Because when they come again, someone will have to fly. And Iron Sparrow, more ghost than machine, waited beside her in the dawn. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.